Starting lineup: illaoi, Xinjiao, Vel'Koz, Ashe, Bran up against Trundle, Warwick, Jinx, Yone, Morgana. Rating of the picks for a casual game. Xinjiao as a jungler. Xinjiao has proven to be too difficult to understand for most casuals, so we're gonna bump Xinjiao down from a 9 to an 8 because of casual skill difficulties. Vel'Koz as a mid, 7. Ashe as a shooter, 6. Brand as support, 7. Trundle as a top, 9. And very close to a 10. Very close to a 10. Warwick in the jungle, 8. Jinx as a mid, 0. Yone as a shooter, 10. Morgana in support, 8. Yeah, this calls for a celebration. It is finally that time. We have finally been lucky enough to experience it. Somebody brave enough to break with the trend and run Yone indeed in shooter slot, which is where he belongs within the casual environment. Yone is way too difficult and way too specific to be expected to leverage all of his damage as a means to control the mid. It is just not enough for mid in a casual environment. It's too demanding. The reason why pros get away with it is because they can make everybody afraid of his power, but that is just not possible. Casuals are gonna try to take hits with him, to play bruiser with him, and that's just not Yone. This is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. And he is probably the greatest shooter in the video game. Moving on. In the running for worst junglers I've ever played with in my life, this Vel'Koz simply refuses to lose, and so he had to go and do it. Because that's what happens when your jungler is doing nothing. Well, no, scratch that actually. That's not what happens when your jungler is doing nothing. Usually, nobody does anything, and they just let it happen. Yeah, skill shots and skill shots is stew, but I dare you to go and find me a greater contrast than the contrast between this Vel'Koz and this Xinjiao player. Now, if you cannot successfully gank Jinx when she's that deep in, played by such an incompetent player with no defense of any kind, you cannot gank that? That is almost like a meme. This play is an exceptional piece of footage to showcase to what extent League of Legends comes down to pure skill. Xinjiao, to be clear by itself, one of the most powerful characters in the video game. Beyond pathetic here. So in this play, this Warwick player is fundamentally going to zone out or space out and forget about the presence of turrets in League of Legends and going to play as though there is no turret. And we see here that element that comes blowing over from other video games again, where we're doing special back reaper damage because we come from behind, and so it's backstab damage. But this is not Call of Duty, and this is not Assassin's Creed, and it doesn't work when you're playing Brand. And as much as this Brand player is capable of leveraging the AoE capacity of his character, by itself this would have gone far better if he just ported to the tower. As a jungler, I am not very familiar with the teleport summoner spell, but I've already noticed on my short time on illaoi that it is usually not a good idea to teleport to something other than a tower, because it usually results in an ambush or you having to come from behind in a very clumsy way, or something similar. And you could have probably saved this Ashe player if you had ported to the turret. This Yone player is going to mouth off after all of this and going to ping Hysteria and ping Crisis and say WTF, enemies are missing. But if you actually watch the play, he could have done way more to protect Warwick and Morgana here. He just let Bran through. So he really has no place to be upset here or to be making comments about others here because he's not doing his own job and then running away like a chicken. In summary, Morgana is only focused on stealing kills, even though you list it as support. Anybody who's stealing kills who's not a shooter is really out of place. A shooter is the only role where focusing on kill stealing is justified. Warwick has no understanding of the core concepts of the video game, and Yone is deliberately letting his allies die just because he wants to say WTF. Meanwhile, on Team Blue, we have Brand here, who flies under the radar but brings the heat. The best The best position for Brand in casual games would be shooter with a heavy support tank, such as Storm or such as Leona. The reason why Brand dies in this play is because all his talents lie in dots and AoE. Brand has some of the best damage over time an area of effect in the game, but he has no range on his abilities. And so you notice that every time he gets really close, he ends up getting killed. In that sense, even Jin or Caitlyn is a better standalone than Bran. Bran really needs somebody to create a distraction for him. If he doesn't have that, in order to survive, he will have to build tanky, and when you build him tanky, you take away his primary asset, which is his firepower. Brand is up there with the champions who are used the most as a bullet hose. People just intentionally try to chain die on Brand. Take a look at his natural armor, or you would take a look at the items that he's carrying around, you would instantly be able to tell that it makes no sense whatsoever to play that risky with him and to go that deep with him. People just like to see him die a billion times for whatever reason. You would never do that on other champions. You would never expect from an Ashe of the same level to take that amount of punishment. What you see here from his Jinx players, if you have that bartering chip that is your full life, you can trade that in. We see this Jinx using her reset at the fountain as a bartering chip for a kill. Beautiful young woman brain fart here. Don't know where this kind of thinking comes from. In the lower tier games, the kind of stuff you see at times is really perplexing. You just decided in this moment, at 13 minutes in, that the function of the tower would just be changed now? And you decided this, so you thought that that was how it was? And so you just ran after this person right under a turret? And you got mauled down immediately. This person, this Jinx, was not even dying. She was maybe at 10% life, maybe a little more. She didn't have any kind of poison on her. She didn't have any kind of burn on her. This Jinx player was just steady at 10% life. And you just invented the rule that they were going to, after retreating at first back to your own turret, you invented the rule that they were going to let you through. And because your emotions were that way, we just have to bear the consequences of that. Yeah, I had non-stop stealth wards up in the Void Grubs. Naturally, even though Xin Zhao could clearly see at all times what was going on, because there was a stealth ward in there, that did not prevent him from letting Warwick walk directly into the Void Grubs and just claiming them without any consequence. So naturally he decides like the moment that I'm gonna go there and arrive there is when the entire point of the rat trap is already over, and then instead I'm gonna go and get my ass kicked because I'm gonna let the rat trap go off first and then go fight the rat. Meanwhile we have the last stand of Trundle Boy and this harassing from this spirit pulling out spell from the third spell is going to mess with his mind, and he's going to say it's all for nothing, and it turns out you go up against me, it's nothing. And I'm going to leverage that defensive superiority and take the kill. Yeah, naturally the one skill that this Xin Zhao player is going to have is skill stealing. So he's going to take the bread out of Brand's mouth here. We see a returning pattern. This Brand has to get so close that he eventually gets cut up. And we see the same exact thing again. He goes Call of Duty mode and Assassin's Creed mode. Brand does, and he comes from behind. Doesn't do anything. You end up getting shot a couple of times that you wouldn't have gotten shot if you just came from a normal spot. Up top, 24 minutes in, we're gonna find out if this poke soul pulling ability has killing potential, and it does. Velcos has mastered this trick of bouncing off magic bullets off of the turrets. We have here a lack of understanding of Xin Zhao and Ash, that when you're playing with illaoi, you have to enable her to use her tentacles. So he should have retreated up the lane. Obviously, I have no buttons to explain that to them. I can't start yelling retreat, retreat. They wouldn't get that. But obviously, you want your enemies to be pulled into that tentacle field, which we then ended up grinding on the turret instead, which is just leveraging the worst part of my character. We have Warwick ignoring the existence of turrets again, because that is a thing. This Morgana player in general is not really using her abilities enough, always full mana. That's not really how you play Morgana. You ought to fling your spells a little more. Yeah, we have this Ash putting everything into attack speed and crit chance, and you are essentially not shooting at all. You just take a shot, then you reposition, get hit all the while that you're repositioning, and take another shot. That's not, this constant jumping around is not how you play a punishing shooter specializing in attack damage. For the millionth time, you can build Ash this way. Some pros do it, but it is not something that I would recommend you to do. And putting me in a position as illaoi with such poor decision making, because I would love to take some of these hits for you, and I could survive hits that would kill other people. Brand dies here, and so does Xin Zhao, and they didn't have to. But you can't stand right next to the turret. You can't put me in a position where I'm immediately going to be used as a human torch the moment that I step out. You have to give me some kind of cover if you want me to tank. Xin Zhao and Ash's behavior in these plays very similar. Keep doing the same thing. You're hitting once, then you're repositioning, then you're hitting once, then you're repositioning. In denial about the very nature of the game, because that repositioning doesn't give you the ability to dodge any of the things that they're doing. So what it results in is it would be the same thing as though you just been tanking it the entire time. So you end up tanking it with items like Eclipse and items like Phantom Dancer, and you go down immediately. And that's how you end up with horrible records. If you want to do this on Xin Zhao, you should A. Stop sidestepping unnecessarily while you're getting hit anyway. If you're getting hit anyway, just engage all the way and bite down all the way. And then also, you should of course use tanky items if you plan on doing that, and constantly dancing in front of others instead of leaping from the bushes, or dealing a bunch of damage with your abilities. And so while we in the pro game have characters like Ash who have their own bodyguards, and are exclusively focused on hitting as hard as possible. In those pro games, characters like Ash are the kings and queens of the team and continuously being protected by every piece, which is not realistic for the casuals. We have characters like Xin Zhao, as well as Nocturne, as well as Talon, as well as Zed, who focus on popping their abilities as fast as possible, maximizing ability cooldown with assassination items, so that everything can constantly go off and they can blitz isolated targets down or weaken targets down. We then, in the pro game, have characters like Sichuani who use a bunch of tank items to stack on top of their passive and go around trying to absorb as many hits for other people as they can and dance around a lot. And this is all in contrast to the casual way of doing things, where in practice we have characters like Ash who end up behaving like Sechuani in the pro game, which is dancing around, but then naturally being built with those king and queen DPS items. We have characters like Xin Zhao who are being built with assassination items, but then end up dancing around like Sechuani and end up trying to provoke the enemy into attacks and moving around and repositioning and daring the enemy and taking hits and absorbing magic damage. And then we have characters like illaoi who end up unironically deciding casual games as a whole. Not just me, but any illaoi-like character and champion, because they are the only ones whose self-sufficient playstyle and intention to go out and tank hits aligns with their build pattern. Everybody else, whether it is Ash trying to build herself as a DPS queen but doing nothing but repositioning, or it is Xin Zhao trying to build himself as an assassin god but then in practice never bursting with his abilities and never using his abilities and never chasing down isolated targets. The reason why characters like illaoi completely decide games, Cho'Gath, Mundo, Darius, Garen, Trundle, Warwick, Kled, Tom, Urgoth. The reason why they end up winning games and being the only deciding factor in casual games is because they are the only type of champion whose build actually aligns with what they are doing. If you are playing this way on Ashe, de facto you are taking up the role of a tank. If you observe this Ashe closely, the way that she behaves, she's actually acting like a tank. She takes a shot, then she repositions and she teases, and then she repositions and she teases, and then she takes a hit for someone, and then she repositions again. That is the behavior of a tank. And the reason why you keep failing over and over and over and over again is because you are building what is de facto your tank as a marksman, DPS god. In order to be a real DPS god, you actually have to have like the support of 2 or 3 people who are constantly trying to intercept others, to protect you, to put you in a protective shell. And the Xin Zhao takes the crown here in the same thing. Basically, the only thing this player did was just take the hit. If you summarize the entire game for Xin Zhao, it's just running around and taking the hit, and you don't have one protective item. And it's all you ever did. You should all go play Sechuani. You should all go play Tom Kench. This is not the behavior of a burst assassin or warrior. This is not the behavior of a DPS god marksman. Especially at the end up top when you observe Xin Zhao and Ashe, they're trying to pull the enemy into me. They are tanking for me, and I have Kanik on and Tornmail on, and I have Ashe and Xin Zhao tanking for me with Eclipse and with Phantom Dancer on him. And you wonder why you're horrible? You wonder why you're horrible? On the lower levels, if you're gonna be functional, a part of the game should just entirely be replaced with nothing but tanks. Because it's the only thing that people can understand how to do. Taking a look at the scoreboard here. Yeah, it is a bit pathetic to always want to go, 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 and then backpedal right away. If you're gonna go, then go. You've at this point selected one of the most all-out aggressive gods in the game, suggesting that you want to focus on being the damage dealer and the shooter of your team. You have played him in shooter slots, darling. At this point, your bed is kind of made. Going with this little buckler here, I mean, and this item, listen, Immortal Shield Bow is indeed an item that synergizes very well with Yone for great players who have already finished their build and want to add something that fits in and adds survivability to them. However, Immortal Shield Bow is not a core fundamental item of Yone. Compared to, for example, Phantom Dancer, it fits very poorly with Yone. It is a way of making him last longer in fights without breaking the synergy with his critical hit chance. However, this should not be your first item. I mean, we're going now. If you're going and you're going, then go. If you really want to shoot hard on the greatest shooter in the game, then at least shoot, for crying out loud. Like, don't go with these half-assed options at this point. If you've come all this way, you have a very good idea here of what works well. These are smart choices. But if you had not gotten these boots here, you could have had 3 great items instead of 2. Your problem is that you buy all these little things, all these little in-betweener things, and they keep you from actually putting together greater things. You cannot see the forest through the trees. You're getting distracted by little things. Ah, the mutilation and the breaking of Trundle. Like we're on some kinky website here. Yep. Breaking Trundle. Besides, do these two even go together? I cannot recall, but I believe that this is the beginning of Black Cleaver, is it not? And this is the beginning of Ruined King, is it not? So these two don't even go together. You see here he was able to do this because he had that little dusting of armor all the way in the beginning. Very frequently, as with me, your second item is the first thing that you put together in the list. The first slot is usually taken up by something else, so the real first item that you put together is usually in the second slot. And just that dusting of armor so that you can hold off death long enough to go on long streaks and you're not costing your team any money, handing the enemy team any money. We see here that illaoi is a territorial champion and she quite literally stays in her lane. We see here a man who brings shame to the name of Xin Zhao, and very unfortunately so. Moving on.
There are kind and gentle dogs. Mine isn't one of them. You will be tested. are not one soul. We are many. Wisdom is frequently of taking the Your people are worldly dead. Mine are worthy. Fight and die with purpose. We never stop.
First blood.
And beat me. Now, we begin. To live is to fight. A good fight. Given you tools to know your destiny. We are all free. Seeing the truth only reminds us.
Has slain an enemy.
Life is too short for fear. Another keywords. Oki, Oki. When I am done with this, it will make a fine offering.
An enemy has been slain. An enemy has been slain.
Good, evil. I am a teacher. Builds what we learn.
An enemy has been slain.
The sea is right.
An enemy has been slain. You have slain an enemy.
It is the storm that is life. buy everyone one of these. The waves will drag you down unless you fight to shore.
An ally has been slain. An enemy has been slain.
They need wisdom. They don't need teeth. We learn from action. Move or die. Men live, men die. Change is good. My name is illaoi. How could I love only one man? They break the reason. Behold!
An ally has been slain.
She lived to another. Maybe crochet. It is not what we have. It is what we can throw away.
An ally has been slain. An enemy has been slain. Double kill. An ally has been slain.
I value truth and barbecue.
Killing spree.
You will be destroyed.
been slain.
Countless lifetimes lead our bodies forward and drive our spirits toward their true destiny.
Turret plating will soon fall. Rampage. Killing spree. Executed.
We are born knowing what to do. We must only
Your team has destroyed a turret.
This ends one of two ways. They run, or I take them. My god doesn't want peace.
An enemy has been slain. Unstoppable. An ally has been slain. Executed. An enemy has been slain.
There is joy in food and fighting. You cannot hide!
Your team has destroyed a turret.
Chase what is desired.
An ally has been slain.
This is a great day.
Enemy double kill.
Many gods ask for worship.
An ally has been slain. Your turret has been destroyed.
Even if I die in motion. Many die, worthy souls fighting for. This is motion! Backroad.
slain. An enemy has been slain.
All that lives,
Double kill.
I don't scare, I don't tire, and I don't stop.
An ally has been slain. An enemy has been slain. Your team has destroyed a turret.
They will learn, or they will die.
An ally has been slain. Your team has destroyed a turret.
If
Dominating.
I destroy it. If I want something, I take it. I am here to test souls. The ocean is calm. It is our desires that stir it.
An enemy has been slain. An enemy has been slain. Double kill. Aced. An enemy has been slain. An ally has been slain.
Bearded lady, Nagakeboro, names don't matter. Action does.
Your team has destroyed a turret.
My god is not love. It is a kick in the pants.
An ally has been slain. Shut down. Your team has destroyed. Legendary.
Motion is all. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
destroyed.